Most bank robberies are a mess. If you run in waving a gun, you're likely to get caught. Cameras, security shutters, witnesses, informers, they're all there to get you. Most over-the-pavement jobs last seconds, and you'll be lucky to get more than 100 grand. Split 4 ways, that doesn't look a lot when you're facing a 10-year stretch. The professionals know better. Big heists are very rare. Stealing millions takes time and planning. You have to figure out how to get in undetected and stay in there undisturbed, long enough to get all the money. But thieving the cash is often the easy bit. Not getting caught is harder. The more you steal, the more they want to catch you. There just aren't many great bank robberies. Knightsbridge, the most affluent district in London, a neighbourhood of royalty, aristocracy and wealth. And in the heart was a discreet little establishment for the privileged to squirrel away their riches. The Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Centre. It was meant to be so safe, even robbers stashed their stuff there. This treasure trove has now changed hands. The front half is a memorabilia shop. The back half is a new deposit business with new owners. But in 1987, the old place held big money, tens of millions in gold, cash, jewels, and drugs. No wonder it caught the eye of a professional.
Valerio Vici was a dangerous man. He lived by the gun. He was naked without the gun. And he probably says, he says in his own words, crime was like a narcotic to a junkie. He had to have it.
Valerio Vici came to England in 1986, on the run from the Italian authorities. As a teenager, he'd been a right-wing terrorist. He'd then gone solo, committing over 30 bank robberies in Italy. He loved robbing banks, outwitting his opponents. He was a perfectionist. When an accomplice screwed up on a job, he shot him dead in the back. He was in this game for risk and ultimately fame.
Well, I was someone who used to rob banks.
In less than a year in London, he knocked off 5 banks in hit-and-run jobs. One was Coutts, the Queen's Bank, which had never been robbed in its 300-year history. Like many felons, he stashed his proceeds in the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Centre. No questions asked. When he saw the place, he knew this could be the big one.
Like a chess game. I mean, the more difficult is the job, the more stimulating.
Robbing a safe deposit like Knightsbridge was hard. These places are rock solid. A man with a gun couldn't even shoot his way in. For months, he studied what he was up against. Reinforced buzzer-controlled doors, sensor pads, video cameras, security guards, alarms to the police. It took time, but eventually he found the weak link. An inside man who was as corrupt as he was. That would give him the edge. The night before the raid, he went through the whole thing in his head, dictating it into a tape recorder, making sure it was perfect to the last second. Except for one old pro from abroad, every one of Vici's team was an amateur. This was the key to Vici's plan. No one on the job, even Vici himself, was known to either the London police or the criminal underworld. No one was going to grass them up. "2 p.m., Sunday the 12th of July, 1987. They drove towards the first checkpoint in the plan. Vici could only hope that his team would do their jobs correctly.
I mean, It's like a big challenge, you know, like Olympic Games. You train for most part of your life, thinking of that day or hoping to have an opportunity.
Arrive at Pond Street, Knightsbridge, 3 o'clock. Check.
Vice had arranged to call his inside man at the centre. For the last 6 months, he'd entangled this man in a web of sex, drugs, and promises of big money. No one else in the gang knew about him. No one would ever know he had taken part. His job was to make sure they got in and that the security cameras were not recording. Had he done it?
Oh, he's not there at all.
Vice was shocked, but carried on. As planned, another gang member called the security centre's reception and pretended to be a prospective customer, arranging an immediate guided tour of the premises. When he finished, Vice phoned his inside man again.
Oh, you're there now? Okay, good. Yeah. Where the fuck were you?
The job was back on.
Number 3 takes up position outside the centre on Old Brompton Road. Number 4 and Peter take suitcases to pub in Rutland Street, awaiting my call.
Vice had visited the centre many times. He knew Sunday afternoon was by far the quietest time. He knew all the alarms and electronic locks were off when the centre was open. 3 employees, the manager and 2 guards watching security monitors, controlled all the doors. They thought the place was impregnable.
I mean, there is no security system that can't be bypassed, because there's always a human mind and a human hand activating him.
This is a video taken shortly after the raid. The building now has a new layout. Parvis Latif, the managing director, took them down these stairs on a guided tour, as they always do for new customers. Vice let his accomplice do all the talking. Vice had been in many times and didn't want to be recognized. He hung back, wore sunglasses, and pretended to have a cold, keeping a hanky at his nose. It worked. Eventually they got to the viewing room where people can open their boxes in privacy, where there are no cameras.
This is the security vault where...
Don't say a word. Just relax and listen to me very carefully. Now, you're going to go back towards the control room. And once we get outside the vaults, you're going to pick up the phone on the table opposite the gate. You get it?
This is where Vice excelled, in scaring people. Latif did exactly as he was told. He showed them the control room. The plan was to pull the guard out, but the guy had his finger right on the panic button. If the guard hit the alarm, not only would the police be alerted, but all the doors would automatically self-lock. Then Vice had an idea.
People coming in and out.
So I started to touch him, you know, in a very, well, devious way, if you like.
Vice stroked the guy's neck and pushed his crutch into his shoulder.
You don't move. You don't breathe.
One guard down and one to go. They sneaked back upstairs into the manager's office and called the other guard in.
John, we have some new clients. Can you bring in some brochures?
Don't move. Get down on the floor. Get out. Okay. You do exactly as I say. There's going to be no problem. Okay.
Now Vice had to get his fake security guard in quick and close down the centre before any customers turned up.
Come in, number 2. Come in, number 2. Lead it to number 2. Take over complete. Come in.
Straight away, we had communication problems. because he had the radio on a different channel.
Coming number 2.
Anyway, the chap was with me inside, went outside, got him. Well, I was really upset. But I got the right hump.
Coming number 4. Coming number 4. Coming number 4.
Vice then called for the other 2 gang members to bring in the tools. When the radio failed again, he got the shock of his life.
I kept cool, and even when I saw another 10, 15 cops, it's unbelievable. They were standing there by 2 police cars doing nothing.
The police were in the area in force, searching for a kidnapped child. Vice had no option but to push on to retrieve his amateur colleagues.
Oh, they were chatting, and when I said, what the fuck are you doing? He said, nothing. He said, you still here? He said, I'm still here. I'm not still here, I'm here, because I was inside. So they missed the point, they didn't understand anything.
It was 3:45 p.m. Valuable time had been lost because of all the foul-ups. A couple of customers were fended off with a story of security improvements. Meanwhile, Vice and the others got to work. The inside man had given him a lock from a box. Vice shaped a sledgehammer to a point that fitted the lock. For 90 minutes, he and his team worked methodically, managing to open 121 boxes.
So it was sort of a bingo. Every time you open a box, you don't know what you're going to find. Jewelry, money, gold, drugs.
In those deposit boxes was money from other heists, silver, clocks, all kind of things stolen from places. But there was money from banks, maybe 10 or 15 by villains.
One final obstacle had to be overcome. A security supervisor would enter at 5 p.m. to close up for the day. Vice hid behind the back door, and when he arrived, stuck a gun in the back of the man's head.
You take it easy, there'll be no problem. You don't move, you don't breathe, you got no problem. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, okay.
At 5:45 p.m., the gang loaded a Renault van with 7 huge sacks full of property and money, worth an estimated £40 million.
Okay, yes. Ciao, arrivederci.
Monday, July the 13th, 1987, worried box holders besieged the safe deposit centre.
All day, customers have been queuing outside the centre. It was an anxious wait, and they were allowed in only a few at a time.
At first, it seemed Vice had pulled off the perfect crime. The video recorders were off all day long. None of the staff recognized any of the robbers. No police informants could shed any light on the perpetrators. The London underworld was struck dumb. But unlike Vice, Flying Squad Detective Inspector Dick Leach and his team had time to do their job properly. After 4 days working round the clock, they found Vice's first mistake.
Shit!
Vice knew he'd left a bloody fingerprint on one of the boxes, but he didn't care. By the time they found out whose it was, he reckoned he'd be long gone. He was very nearly right. 2 weeks of searching UK fingerprint records by hand turned up nothing. Then Leach's team went through thousands of Interpol files on European criminals. On the very last card, they get a match to someone they'd never heard of, Valerio Vice. Italian police quickly provided a list of known associates. The police put surveillance teams on many of them, but Vice was nowhere to be seen. In fact, in the month following the robbery, Vice had been flying all over the world, disposing of the proceeds. He had told his gang to leave the country and stay away from him. Against those same strict instructions, his fence, Israel Pincus, went to White's Hotel in Bayswater looking for him. Pincus got a parking ticket. The next day, it came through on the computer. Dick Leach's team headed for the hotel. As they waited outside, a man turned up in a black Ferrari. After a short struggle with 15 cops, Vice went quietly. But for the car, he'd have gotten away with it. He was meant to fly to Colombia days earlier, but the export license for the car was delayed. Vice wouldn't leave without his Ferrari. The inside man turned out to be Parvis Latif, the owner of the security center. Mesmerized by the flamboyant Vice, he agreed to the plan because his business was going bankrupt. He was sentenced to 18 years. The others got similar. Vice got 22. In 1992, Vice successfully applied to be transferred to an Italian prison. He was sent to Pescara on the Adriatic coast.
I am in Pescara because I am in prison in Pescara. I am still serving my sentence, but I am allowed to get out from prison in the morning and only to go back to sleep in prison in the night, about 9:30, and working during the day.
No one knows for sure how much Vice netted. He claims he actually got £60 million. The police recovered $10 million in valuables. But perhaps money wasn't the only attraction. Vice's take on the robbery is that he tried to be the greatest in the world, but failed.
People believe that you do a job, you get away with it, and then you spend 5-6 years in prison for whatever amount of money you like, and that's fair enough game. I don't believe so. Or you get away with it, or you don't. You don't, you failed.
Failed or not, Vice must have a few shillings stashed away here and there. Whether or not it was worth it, only he knows. Vice was an expert who'd robbed loads of banks before going for the big one. In 1995, in Germany, 6 guys conned and shot their way to notoriety, getting away with millions on their very first job. 10 years after the collapse of communism and the fall of the wall, a powerful new Berlin rises out of the vacant lots of the former East. The city is up for grabs. Turkish gangs clash with Russian mafia. English architects take tea with former communists. American hotels occupy old state police buildings. Everywhere, people are on the move. In Schlachtensee, a sleepy suburb, the colony of US diplomats have moved out, no longer needed in the new world order. Now only rich Berliners live there. Underneath the sycamore trees lies a small sub-branch of Germany's biggest high street bank, the Commerzbank. It is 10:30 a.m., Tuesday the 27th of June, 1995. 200 meters away in a railway siding, 4 tooled-up guys are about to pull off their first bank job.
Schnell!
Only they knew what was about to unfold. Their little robbery was about to become one of Germany's biggest and most notorious scams.
I thought they'd just take the money and be out again in 5 minutes, and then it would all be over. But it certainly took a lot longer than that.
Bettina Eckroth had popped in to deposit a cheque before going to pick her daughter up from a dance class. Her daughter would have a long wait. Norbert Buchwald had just finished using the cash machine and was leaving when the gang dragged him back in.
This is where I was told to lie on my stomach. He says, lie down, hands on your back, and then I was handcuffed. And that's how I stayed for the 17.5 hours.
The first 999 calls said that some heavily armed men had tried to rob the bank. They'd left their van running, and now it was blocked in. To the police, it seemed a smash and grab had gone badly wrong. The gang must have panicked and locked themselves in. The Berlin Police Special Forces, the SEK, prepared to go in. But first, they had to know who they were up against.
And after a while, they sent out a hostage with a note which said that they wanted a getaway car, a helicopter which should be ready nearby so they could flee, and 17 million marks.
The woman released told Texter and his team that 16 hostages were being held by 4 robbers, packing pump-action shotguns and grenades, and that the robbers were trigger-happy.
They kept on running back and forth firing whenever they heard a noise in the flats above.
The problem was that none of the villains would speak to us. They always made the manager speak for them, so we couldn't assess what they were like. We wanted to offer them money and hopefully, in return, get them to release 1 or 2 hostages, whom we could then have interrogated. Well, that was our first plan anyway.
The robbers were having none of it. All day long, they kept up with their demands for a car, helicopter, and 17 million marks. At 4 p.m., they had a serious sense of humor failure. They took a hostage and put him in the window.
The villains said that the first hostage would be shot at 5 o'clock. I said, okay, we'll take that risk. I had to see how serious they were.
Luckily, by 6 p.m., the hostage had still not been shot, but the gang were getting very impatient. They forced a hostage to call a TV station.
Wir sind hier seit fast 8 Stunden. Die sind schwer bewaffnet.
The woman says, we've been waiting and waiting for 8 hours. They're not joking. They're heavily armed. We're lying on the ground. We're scared. They're not joking. Then other hostages in the background shout out, "Help us, help us, we want to get out. We're scared, do something." The SEK had to relent. 5 million marks, around £1.5 million, was dropped at the back door of the bank by a policeman. To show he wasn't armed, the robbers insisted he wear just his underpants. The handover didn't get any hostages released. The robbers were hugely unimpressed by the money. From then on, they refused to talk. It seemed the only option left was a forced entry by the SEK. However, at midnight, the robbers took the initiative again. The hostages thought they were going to be executed. The gang put money bags over their heads. Then everything went quiet again. In fact, everyone sat in silence until 2:30 in the morning.
Then I heard some woman in the front here saying that she had to go to the toilet, but there was no reply. Then the phone rang and no one answered. And I thought, well, they've gone. Now it's all over.
Then we decided to try and ring the police. The police refused to believe that what we said was true.
The SEK are so confident in their abilities that they said we could sit in their training room while they charged in, firing live ammo. When they storm a building, they use stun grenades, shotguns, and rapid-fire machine guns to terrify everyone into a state of submission. Their assumption is always that the robbers will try to secrete themselves in the group of hostages. At 4:30 a.m., they went into the bank.
That's a situation which is difficult for the hostages to understand. In principle, we treated them as though they were villains. We did not speak nicely to them, we did not help them up or take them outside, but we jumped on them, forced them to the ground, screamed at them, dragged them outside, and only then outside, when we knew they were all hostages, you know, there could have been a villain amongst them, only then, when we knew that, were we nice and friendly to them.
Once the SEK had dragged everyone out, screaming and weeping, they realized they only had the hostages. The truth dawned on them. The gang were already home and dry. The police and the SEK had been the victims of a huge con. This was no smash and grab gone wrong. As the SEK shot their way into the empty basement, they found only a hole. The robbers had spent the last year building a tunnel under the bank. After midnight, they'd simply slipped out and crawled 200 meters under the feet of the police.
This is the Commerzbank Schlachtensee. If you walk 200 meters down this street, you come to the garage where the tunnel starts.
The robbers had dug a 60-meter tunnel from this garage into the side of a rain sewer, apparently by hit and miss. They then crawled 100 meters along the sewer until they got close to the bank and started digging again.
The tunnel was 6 meters down. We estimate that it took the robbers 3 to 4 months to dig this piece from the garage to the sewer.
Right, now we're at the junction of Breisgauer Street and Matterhorn Street. The villains travelled these 200 meters. They'd come through their tunnel, down the sewer, and then they reached this area. And the next tunnel they dug from the junction to the bank was 13 meters long.
the police sent a robot camera down into the tunnel to check for booby traps. This is the junction where the robbers' tunnel from the bank meets the sewer. The police camera gives a false impression of size. The sewer is only 60 centimeters in diameter. It's too small even to kneel in. After extensive safety checks, the Berlin Water Board agreed to let us film an actor crawling along the sewer.
So put the camera down on a rope, mate.
It took him over 5 minutes to cover 40 meters, and was only possible doing it the way the robbers did, lying flat on a skateboard. Every day, earth had been dragged out on these trucks and taken away to forests. Wood was stolen from building sites to shore up the tunnel. 3,000 brackets were bought from DIY stores. They even rigged up their own air ducting. What they lacked as first-time bank robbers and tunnel engineers, they made up for with improvisation and determination. On the morning of the robbery, 2 of the gang crawled along the tunnel and waited under the bank, while the 4 others stormed through the front door. Then they smashed through the floor into the bank. While 2 were upstairs dealing with the hostages and making impossible demands, the others were downstairs working on the bank's safes and deposit boxes. All day they ferried the ransom money and the cash from the safes out to the garage, right under the police cordon. At midnight, the whole gang simply returned to the garage and disappeared into the night. These guys were ingenious, brave, and completely unpretentious. 4 of them drove off in a battered old VW. 1 got the bus, and another jumped in a taxi back to central Berlin. Getting home at 1 o'clock, they were able to watch the SEK freeing the hostages on television. But while the robbers had executed a brilliant plan, their naivete as criminals let them down. They failed to cover their tracks. This is the garage where the tunnel started. It was rented in a false name. But the car repair shop next door was rented in the name of a Syrian, Mutaz al-Baratzi. In it, the police found wood, tape, and air ducting, which matched that in the tunnel. Surveillance of al-Baratzi led the police right to the others. All had stayed in Berlin, hoping to lie low until things cooled off. The leader was Mutaz's brother, Khaled al-Baratzi, who had a minor conviction for drug dealing. He'd got his family and friends in on the job. Everyone else was a first-time criminal. They got sentences ranging from 2 to 12 years. Many mysteries still remain about this job. The robbers won't tell who came up with the idea in the first place. The police suspect but can't find an inside man at the bank. Otherwise, how would the robbers have known one area under the vault has an especially thin concrete floor? And finally, where is the money? The police recovered 3 million marks from the robbers' apartments. But at least 12 million was taken from the bank safes, in addition to the 5 million ransom. 14 million marks, over £4 million, is still missing. The only clue is that soon after the job, one of the gang flew to Syria. When the others were arrested, he returned straight away and gave himself up. Perhaps some inmates of Tegel prison in Berlin are waiting for a rainy day. By today's standards, Berlin was a well-planned job. The fashion now is for drug-fueled shootouts. The heyday of big heists seems to be over. Back in groovy 1970s California, it was just starting. In 1972, a gang of elite bank robbers traveled over 2,000 miles to break into a bank near Los Angeles. Instead of minutes or hours, they took days to break in, bypass the alarms, and crack open the vault. The press called it the Mission Impossible job.
It was by far, at that time in the history of the United States, the #1 bank burglary ever.
First impression is that we had a very, very superb burglary here. All in all, you just have to say that these guys knew what they were doing.
The United California Bank at Monarch Bay Plaza in Laguna Niguel still stands today. It's been empty for 4 years. This was and still is the shopping area for the Monarch Bay residences, a millionaire's seaside haven, a coastal Beverly Hills. In March 1972, the robbers targeted the bank because of the affluence of the clientele. But the clientele had friends in high places, including the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. The robbers came from Youngstown near Cleveland, Ohio. They were led by an expert safecracker, an Italian-American with connections to the mafia. His name was Emil Dinzio.
He's really not a whole lot different, except for career choice, than anyone else. He's a person.
He's a tough son of a gun who is not used to coming in second, and he anticipates winning by using brute force or money or other resources to make things come out his way.
At the time, Youngstown was fought over by the Cleveland and Pittsburgh mafias. It was a crime-ridden area. The Diebold Alarm Company was based nearby. Information on how to disable the latest alarms filtered out through corrupt employees. Dinzio was a master burglar who knew just how to use that info. Going in when the place is closed means you can blow things up. This vault door looks impressive, but it is only for show. It's much easier to go through the vault roof. But even that's no picnic. It's 1.5 feet of reinforced concrete. On top of that, the back wall of the Laguna Niguel bank vault is only a few feet from the pharmacy next door. It was open 7 days a week and didn't close until 10 p.m. There was a bar which stayed open late and a plaza security guard. Any work would have to be done in the dead of night, and it would have to be done quietly.
The point of entry had to be around on this side here, which was obscured from view for most of the people. This was probably the point of entry to the roof right here.
At 10:30 on the night of the 24th of March, 1972, Emil and his gang arrived in the bushes behind the bank. With a ladder stolen from a nearby church, one of the gang went up and disabled the outside bell alarm. Then Emil went up. He bust open the electricity supply to the air conditioning units on the roof and started drilling. Every bank has an Achilles heel. At Laguna, the roof of the bank was only 3/4 of an inch of plywood. Dinzio dropped into the loft space and right onto the concrete roof of the vault room itself. Crawling through the rafters, he found the cupboard with the telephone lines in it. He had to find the wires which connected the vault sensors to the alarm in the local sheriff's office. If he just cut the wires, he'd break the circuit and the alarm would sound. So he had to make a circuit of his own using a battery before he could chance cutting the wires from the vault. The gang hid nervously for over 2 hours, hoping the alarm hadn't gone off in the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Then they went in. With a gang member keeping lookout for the security guard and any straggling late customers from the corner bar, Emil attacked the concrete of the vault roof.
Stop, stop, stop.
Okay, okay.
When he'd finished drilling 16 holes, he filled each one with a stick of explosive. Meanwhile, outside, others filled sandbags and wrestled them to the vault. The sandbags were meant to muffle the blast and direct the charge down onto and hopefully through the vault roof.
Do it.
But the blast was much louder and smokier than they'd anticipated. They were sure half of Southern California had heard it. But after another 2-hour wait, no cops turned up. When they went in, they saw they'd blown a hole right through the roof of the vault. Dawn was fast approaching. With the main prize right there in front of them, the gang displayed extraordinary guts and patience. They left the bank, sealing up the roof hole to cover any outside traces of their work.
For somebody to spend 3 days in a bank like that over a weekend just was incredible balls.
This is approximately, I would say, right in the center, wouldn't you? Yeah, this is that the hole was made. Obviously, it's been repaired. This would be the spot that the cut was made. To say it was a little off so that the actual hole in the vault would have to be about right where that flashlight's showing.
Emil and his gang waited and watched. Saturday dragged on. That night they went back in, not sure if the police would be there to meet them. All through Saturday night, they smashed open hundreds of safe deposit boxes. One of the gang was a fence. Right there in the vault, they went through everything, deciding what to take and what to leave. Again, with morning approaching, they calmly left, leaving their booty behind. All Sunday, they kept an eye on the bank. These guys were ultra cool. When asked later if it was nerve-wracking sitting around all day, they looked askance as if to say, why would it be nerve-wracking? Long before dawn on Monday morning, they neatly bagged up their cash, bonds, valuables, and gold and slipped out. In today's terms, they netted over $30 million. Special Agent Paul Chamberlain was given a huge team by J. Edgar Hoover to solve America's biggest bank burglary. Chamberlain worked on the Patty Hearst kidnapping case and now runs an international private investigation firm. Laguna Niguel was his first major heist.
We're not used to bank burglaries like this in Southern California. Never have been, still aren't. It was that unusual. The brazen way they had cut through the roof and blew this thing in the middle of the night indicated an incredible expertise with explosives because the neighbors didn't hear this.
On top of that, the robbers had left very little evidence.
Well, the sheriff's department had done most of the dusting for the prints, and they came down and they went through and they did a meticulous job. Took several days to do it. And if I'm not mistaken, they did not come up with a single print.
Chamberlain then tried circulating descriptions of the robbery to every FBI office in the country. All he got was a vague list of over 100 possible suspects from Youngstown, Ohio. Undeterred, he asked the Chicago FBI to check all those names against recent flight records. With J. Edgar Hoover on their tail, the Chicago FBI came up with 5 people on the list who'd flown out to Los Angeles on the same flight sometime in early March. Unbelievably, the gang had used their own names. Chamberlain, with his massive manpower resources, then decided to interview every cab driver who worked Los Angeles Airport that day.
About interview number 400, we find a cab driver. The gentleman was from Ghana, I believe, who said that he picked up 5 of the meanest looking, toughest guys he'd ever seen in one cab, and they all asked to go to Linwood, California, and they tipped him $100.
Chamberlain figured the apartment he took them to was too small to accommodate 5 people. But massive house-to-house inquiries failed to locate where the others had stayed. Was that the end? Not for Chamberlain. He swapped the teams around and made them do it all again. Second time, they found a motel where one of the gang had stayed. He'd made a call to an estate agent. She remembered letting an airline pilot's apartment in Laguna Niguel out to a group of guys for a month. It was the cleanest apartment the FBI had ever visited. The whole place had been rubbed down with alcohol. Without a single fingerprint, they couldn't prove that the gang had even been in the Laguna Niguel area during the job.
And as the search team was leaving the residence, one of the guys opened the dishwasher and found inside the dishwasher a large number of dishes, forks, spoons, glasses. Someone had neglected to turn on the start button.
That was enough for the judge to order a search warrant. On June the 27th, the FBI in Youngstown entered Emil Dinzio's home and found money belonging to Laguna Niguel. The trial commenced in September 1972 in Los Angeles. The whole of the Dinzio family was there.
Jurors were coming back into the courtroom. We were sitting in the courtroom, and one of the female jurors looked over at us. I was 4 and my sister was 3, and she was crying. And my mother knew right then that my father had been convicted, that they had found him guilty, because presumably the woman was crying for his small children. And I remember she said, oh, they found him guilty at that point.
These guys were fish out of water in Los Angeles. They didn't belong here. And therefore, they didn't spend any money on law enforcement. They didn't try to buy crooked cops. They didn't have long-time personal relationships. And although they committed the most marvelous bank burglary ever, I think, it was terrific. They did it in a city that was not right for them, and because of that, they ended up going to jail.
Dinzio and the others were sentenced to 20 years, but he was released for good behavior in 1984.
If this had happened in Cleveland, Ohio, they'd had 3 guys working on this, not several hundred, and therefore it would have been much more difficult to solve, if not impossible.
Really big robberies like Laguna Niguel, Knightsbridge and Berlin are rare. They attract enormous interest and demand to be solved. The police and authorities will stop at nothing to jail the great bank robbers. For men like Emil Dinzio, bank robbing is in their blood. He was found allegedly casing a bank in 1995 at the age of 64. He took a policeman hostage. Because of his previous record, he was sentenced to 25 years.